All right, everybody, here we are, Business Roundtable Podcast, once again coming to you every week. My name is David Carr, one of the hosts of the Business Roundtable of Steward Your Business, helping bring business owners, team leaders together to accomplish great things. And I've got an amazing returning guest, Charlie Chen. Welcome back, Charlie.
Thank you, David. It's always great to be back and great to be on. Thank you.
Well, I'm super glad to have you back because right before we recorded, we were talking and you offered to kind of switch the seats at the table tonight. And normally I'm asking the questions and doing a little bit more prompting. But tonight you had a great idea of this language around leadership and a framework that you use. And I thought it would be great to bring a different perspective and understanding to the podcast. As always, we like to have different voices. So I'm going to throw it to you so you can talk about the 4 languages of leadership and explain that and open that up. And let's get going. Let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for being open to having the tables be turned. And so the idea that I had proposed is talking about the 4 languages of leadership, which I always like to give credit where credit is due. I picked this up from a well-known trainer in the direct sales world. So I follow different trainings across different industries. So there's a well-known trainer called Eric Worre. He wrote a book called The Network. It says Go Pro, how to become a network marketing professional. So because oftentimes with that profession, the stigma is people that can't get a real job, they go and try to sell their friends and family, and that's why they're doing that. So there's actually a professional way of doing it. So he talks about the 4 languages of leadership, and so we'll just go one by one. So I'm actually going to go in the order which I just from what I've learned about it, that makes most profound sense, even though it may not be intuitive. It may be counterintuitive, but it's actually how humans tick. And so I would say the first one out of the 4, and I'll just rattle them off, is one is vision casting, second is storytelling, third is assignments, fourth is challenge, like challenging people. And so the reason I start with vision, because as the Proverbs, right? I can't quote the exact which book it is, but where there's no vision, people perish, right? So how just from your profession, David, and your career within helping teams develop culture and stewarding their business, how would you say that leadership language of vision casting has played a part in terms of where it ranks in your process?
It's a great question because I work with business owners typically that are in a growth phase, and what happens is if you are a founder of the business or early on in the business, you've caught onto that vision typically. But what I found is they forget, or not they don't forget. But what happens is as new people come in, they don't know that, and they forget to share that vision casting with them. What you're talking about. Yes. So, to your point, I looked it up. Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. Yes. So, if what happens is your organization will not be able to survive in the long haul if you don't have that vision. It can go quite a long ways with the vision of the business owner, but it's got to be transferred to others that are coming alongside if you want to have that growth. You want to have that scaling. Otherwise, it'll live and die with you, right?
Right. Absolutely. And the reason I also start with vision is I've heard this, and I can't exactly quote who said it, but belief before action. So before you ask for people to act on anything, you have to build up their belief. And so the way you build that belief is starting with casting the vision of the possibilities of what does success look like, right? Like beginning with the end in mind, like what I believe John C. Maxwell talks about in the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. So Would you say that's been the case typically, like in your in like your format, in the way that you help businesses with their culture? Would you say that like identifying what success looks like first before planning out the action steps is typically how you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have something that drives you. People want to be a part of something greater, and if you don't provide them that, it's harder to get people to follow and to come alongside. So you're gonna have a difficult time doing that. In fact, when I worked with a woman that had started a company, and one of her philosophies was also this idea: you give before you get. She saw the bigger picture is what drew me into her, that what could be. And to me, and I worked for a previous company that it got fuzzy. I just say, I don't think it was completely gone, but it wasn't clear either. So it was easier for me to leave that company to go to the other company because I felt a clearer vision of what could be. She even invited me in the process of helping, help this company. What does this company look like as it goes forward? What are we striving to become? And so I think that is a really important transition phase when it's just you as a solopreneur, perhaps a very small company, that you're being very intentional about what that is. So you get people to come alongside, and then we'll figure out, like you said, the implementation, like how do we actually make this happen? But if you try to figure out all the way to make it happen, and I know from your IT world, Charlie, if somebody tries to do all the thing, get it all done, and then they bring it to market, and they're like, well, that's not what people were. It wasn't quite the vision. And I mean, you're trying to get all done. You've got to get other people to buy into the vision, right?
Yeah.
If they don't buy in, you're like, oh, I got this perfect thing. Yeah, but I'm not sure. I'm not buying into the vision there of it.
Right. No, 100%. Now, when you help the businesses that you work with to develop their culture and just bridge that gap between the founder's vision and the people and the staff and the team, what are some effective ways of helping translate their vision into ways, in terms of ways that they can convey them where it's loud and clear, right? Where the team, the company doesn't even blink, where they're super crystal clear on what the company stands for.
Right. Well, I think vision is tied to, we talked about this in previous episodes, Charlie, values. So you want, we're shooting for this, and it's predicated upon this underlining value. So what I would say, and I was just talking with a client about this today, is like, are you clear on the values? And if you have too many, it's a little muddy, even though they're all good. I think it's important that you reinforce this is the value that supports the mission and the vision. And one way you could do that, for example, would be anytime you have a meeting, particularly internal meeting, a larger meeting where you're having a group come together and say, because this would literally take a minute, like look at a value and say, what is this value? Oh, teamwork. Why do we have to work as a team? Because we're trying to accomplish this mission. Okay. And you look at those values and you state them and you reinforce them. And you've heard me say this before, Charlie, but it's like, I don't just tell my wife I love her once. It's a repeated thing.
For sure.
Right? It's a reinforcing of marriage as a mission, and we have a greater vision for what we can be. And so it's like, what's the values? What brings us back? What's the foundation? You have to remind yourself of that. And as new people come in, the further they are away from the original founder or creator, it requires even more intention, in my experience.
Yeah. How many values would you say is too much to where it gets muddled? Is there
I like 10, around 10.
Okay,
I think if
10 or less.
Yeah, if you start getting 12, 13, maybe get 15, 20, it's really hard to remember all of those.
Exactly.
What happens is the values also are similar. They're not. They're different, but they're similar. So what you want to do is it forces you to say, okay, if I can only pick 10 or only pick 8, what are the ones that really mean the most. I was
For
actually
sure.
just doing this too, and we'll probably get this later in assignments, but I was working on roles and responsibilities, and we were going through key performance indicators or metrics. And I said, we don't write everything down on somebody's role.
Right.
We write down the most important things that we want them to achieve.
Right.
And so that's really, I think, the vision is what's the most important things here that motivates, that reinforces the team. You keep those top of mind, that those parties, because what happens is you can get muddled, and things can get sideways with your employees. And I remember I read the book Start With Why, which is one of my favorite books by Simon Sinek, and he was talking. There's a story in there that stood out to me about this woman yelling at people getting on the airplane. Like, she was working for the airline, and she's like yelling at them, get in line, do this and that, because the value in her mind, I don't know if this is the company would agree, but in her mind, the vision was we got to be on time, and we got to get people, the plane's got to be on time, which is not a bad thing, but it shouldn't be at the expense of belittling your customers. It's like, well, we're on time, but everybody feels like crap. It's like, that's probably not good. So I think people might be more forgiving if the airplane was a little bit late, but yet they felt treated well and they understood things happen, and how do we work together. But she was in a threatened space. She's like, if I don't do this, I could lose my job. So yeah,
very cool. Now, just to cap off this vision, leadership language. And how's the background noise, by the way? I didn't.
You get a little bit of like a ringing back there.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, there's something going on outside, but the part where it says where there's no vision, people perish. Like, what's the downside? Like, what's the risk, right? What's the threat to not having a clear vision? Like what you talked about when it's muddled. What is that people perishing look like? What have you seen where it was just very unfortunate, right? Very sad outcome that we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Well, I think I hate to say it, but sometimes I see it in government agencies where people feel like they're just like there. They don't really feel like they're contributing to a greater mission and a vision of what it can be. And so then they abuse their position, possibly for power, to make them, themselves feel better or more powerful. If they stay there, if it's a private company, for example, you may have high turnover, so you can't keep people. I've noticed this particularly, those in the 20-somethings. They're big on, hey, what do you stand for? What are you actually trying to achieve here in the world? And if they're going to be quick to leave, and if you keep losing your workforce, it's very costly to bring on new people, to hire them, and try to instill in them. So just look at your turnover. That's one thing I'm really passionate about, is organizational health, is how do you keep that team intact? And the longer you can keep that team intact, you're going to be more profitable, more effective over the long haul, generally speaking. So I would definitely look at that. If you have leaders, that you got to be careful too about the aligning yourself with leaders that really share your vision and want to have that. I've been in the companies too where the business owner brought in somebody and they didn't share that same philosophy. They had good technical skills perhaps to do certain work, but at the end of the day, they didn't share that vision. And what happens is you could have conflict. You're bringing in conflict within your company because now you have, my vision is this way, my vision is this way, and you're basically splitting up your company. And that also happens too, where there's divisions, and people break off and other things. And so, if you're not intentional about that, there's a whole host of problems that you can run into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the people not having buy-in and just it's detrimental, and it's costly, like you said. It's way more costly when you lose people that may have tribal knowledge of how things are done, and just having to retrain. That constant turnover is way more costly than being able to build on people and have that lead toward the fulfillment and the materialization of the founder's vision.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. So the next one I wanted to touch on is the second language, which is storytelling. There's a phrase in sales. It's facts tell, stories sell. So why is storytelling a powerful language of leadership?
Wow. This is a really good one, and actually one I've been trying to work on more. I think having a compelling story or narrative, people grab onto that. And now it has to come from authenticity. Here's the thing. I think it's really important. People can tell stories to grab your attention, but if it's not coming from a truly authentic place, that could be bad. So what I've tried to do is, one of the things I found when I became a coach full time was I wanted to essentially let my life be an open book, an open story. And there's different ways I found that you can do that, but most important, I think, thing is leading from a place of authenticity and reality, and not trying to sugarcoat or try to, massage it, because I think people see through that. And I think we all love stories. That's why we like going to the movies. That's why we like reading a book. There's different ways we consume, social media. I think it's just a way of reaching. It's our humankind that we love to hear that. The better we can get at storytelling, the better we can have deeper relationships.
Yeah, 100%. And it's that authenticity, that relatability,
Mm-hmm.
that if you can have whoever you're leading feel like, wow, that's like, you're not like just some idol now, right? That I can't ever be like you. If that's how they feel, then you will never enlist the help that you need to fulfill your vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you can show people like your hero's journey, which is essentially the storyline that almost all, if not all, Disney movies are based on, is that hero's journey where there's the main character goes through trials and tribulations and finds victories by overcoming that challenge. And so if there's no struggle, you take away the struggle, you take away the victory. So, but if you can make yourself relatable and authentic, and therefore they feel like that they're, that what success looks like, or what success that they want to strive after is not a pie in the sky. And therefore that makes it a possibility for them to actually to move toward that. Would you say that would be the case?
Yeah. I mean, I like, I'll give you an example of just that relatability. So I worked for the company called eCore Consulting for years. I knew the leader, but we had one of the things I loved about stories was we had a retreat, and I came to the company. I think the company had been around, let's just say 15 years, something, by the time I came there. And there was stories I had no clue about, like how the company got started. And the owner was talking about, like, I started this in my garage. He shared about like this journey of it. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize, or what, this is where you were, or this, you had this issue, or you were this project. And to me, it made me more interested in the company, more interested to know about it. Like, I didn't know these stories. They knew about them, these original owners. They've been around a long time, and they think they forgot that other people didn't know this stuff. And so we literally had like a session on just kind of the history of the company. And so I would say this idea of storytelling is great for history and sharing the journey, because a lot of people think, well, you just were successful, or you just got that, this just happened. And I'm like, it didn't just happen. And you understand all ups and downs. And to me, it's much more interesting. We just had the Olympics too, Charlie. So I didn't watch a lot of it, but when I do watch the Olympics, what they do a lot of times is they'll give you a background story on the athlete. If you just watch the athlete, it's still amazing to watch them. But when you understand their background, what took them to get there, the things, it's way more engaging. And so I would say don't discount that value of the story in whatever aspect of the business you're in or the leading. Because I think sometimes we just minimize that, especially if it's about ourselves. So I would say encourage each person that's leading, embrace your stories because that's what made you. And yes, there probably are negative things there, is what happened at the time, but how has that helped you to become the person you are today? And looking back with gratitude and appreciation, the sense of, yeah, I wouldn't have necessarily wanted to go through that, but this is where I helped me or I'm at today.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree on the just the appeal of hearing the story behind the athlete or whoever that we're following, that we admire. It just makes it humanizes them, right? Because at the end of the day, human beings were creatures of emotion. As much as we'd like to believe we're creatures of logic and reason. And so when we can identify that human to human connection, then it just makes it more meaningful to be a part of. And so,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. So the next language, now that we've built up that belief, right, cast that vision, told that story so that it connects and build up that belief level in our people and maybe even in ourselves, right? So what the assignment part is like there's a phrase that I learned recently, or a concept. The best time to ask for action or a favor is when somebody expresses gratitude, right? So when you can build up that belief that it's like where they're thankful, they're grateful to be a part of your cause, then that's when you assign action. And so in terms of the way you give assignments, I mean, obviously a vision without a plan for execution is just a pipe dream, right? So
you're dreaming.
What are some frame? Because obviously we've heard smart, we've heard smarter, like in terms of assignments, things like that. What's a framework that you like to use, David, when it comes to actionable items like assignments?
I mean, SMART goals and key performance indicators, or things that what we're trying to achieve, what's measurable, I would say. One of the things I found in assignments, particularly in my world of consulting, is there's usually a step missing. So what I like to do is, when you're assigning something, you look at the task. What is that? What's that person? Is it assigned? We've talked about 5 voices in the past too. We look at how they process information, how they make decisions. We're looking about evaluating ideally who's the best person to assign this to, if you have options. Or if oftentimes there's one of the ones I find that's missed the most is we talk about time bound, but how much time, to the level that a senior level person doing the assignment is going to get it done quicker than the same person at a lower level. So what is that when you're looking for assigning something? What's the item? What's the win? What does that look like? They don't even know. It's kind of like a mini vision casting, if you will. It's like, what does a win look like here? I mean, I get it done within X amount of time. This is what it looks like when I'm done, the product or the service. It's like, this is what it looks like. What's the expectation as far as communication, checking back in, letting me know my progress, right? And so oftentimes what happens is when you're doing assignment, you will miss one of those things. You'll forget to say, well, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is what the win looks like. They'll say, just get this done, because they forget, oh, this person hasn't done this, or they haven't done it a lot. Or they'll say, well, maybe they'll tell them that, but they didn't tell them like how much time it needs to be. Are allocated to do that task. And so then they either spend too much, or usually I find it's doing too much, not too little. They're like, just keep spending time on it. You're like, well, I wasn't expecting that much time. So knowing exactly what it is, what they want, what's the win, and how much time it's going to get them. But then if you can back up even further, and understand how this person works, that will help you be more successful in getting that assignment completed. We've talked about the 5 voices again. That's what I also with teams work together on. And I'm really passionate about, because people process assignments in different ways. And they also have to know, where does this fit in the world with everything else I've got going on? We've talked about like that urgent, important, the Einstein square: urgent, important, not urgent, not important, not, and so forth. And so, right, the quadrant, they have to know, where does this fit with everything else as well? Because, right, you may have an assignment, but inevitably some other assignment or something else is going to come up, or a problem or roadblock. In fact, I even just posted on my LinkedIn today a little tool that I provide folks in helping in that area, their daily or weekly action plan. So those are just some things that come to mind, Charlie.
Awesome. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
So the thing I also wanted to touch on, that's 100% accurate when you said about, based on people, how they work, how they take the language, their what language that they lead out with. Like a pitfall that I personally deal with, that I have a challenge with, is getting too much into the weeds of telling people what to do, rather than letting them know the objective and the key results that, like what said, KPI, right? Key performance indicator. So actual giving them, letting them know what needs to be done, and if there are things that need to be done a specific way, then communicate that. But then also letting go of not being too attached to micromanagement, because then that restricts creativity. It restricts the possibility of them bringing maybe a more efficient way of doing that same task. So if you let them know, this is what needs to be done, this is how I currently do it. If you know of more efficient ways of doing it, go ahead and do that. Let me know, or let me know, and obviously if it doesn't compromise integrity of the task that needs to be accomplished, then let's adopt to that. So that's the whole point of bringing on a team that's best at what they do. Because if you are the best person at every area that you need in your business, then you're really in trouble, because you really just basically hired a bunch of order takers. A business is run by a team of A players that you want to be the dumbest person at that table, right? So, that's what Robert Kiyosaki talks about in Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? It's your power team. So you don't have a business unless you have people that are really good at what they do in their respective seats on the bus.
Right.
So would you say that that's a common pitfall that other businesses that you've worked with kind of gets sucked into?
I mean, we assign, remember, like you said, Charlie, we assign or show up naturally. Like you said, you may get into the weeds and you realize, oh, that's not the best way for me to be. That's the way I'm showing up. And then what you might be doing is you're reinforcing that for that person. Then they're going to get the weeds with the other person that they're assigning. Well, if Charlie gets in the weeds with me, I'm going to get the weeds with them, because that's what I see. So it's like cascading challenges there. So it's important to understand, like you said, and this is important too when you're empowering yourself, like you said, Charlie, of like, as you're talking to them, you're like, you could even empower them and say, look, I have a tendency in the weeds here, and I'm going to empower you to say, I've got enough information, Charlie, I can do this. Can you back off? And you're like, yes, I can. And they're not feeling threatened by telling you that, right? Because you've created an environment experience. Like they said, if we all know our positions, I like to use a football or soccer as an analogy, because there's a lot of positions. Then we can pass the ball, we can shoot, we can score, we can all win. But now we're all doing different roles, though. It's not all the same. We're not all in the same position. So don't try to be the same position. Do your position, what you do well, and let the other person do what they do best. Right? And then get out of the way. That's what I try to do.
Yeah, go pick up their dry cleaning, right? Stay out of their way.
It's like, I mean, let them do what they do best, right? I mean, don't try to, like, I'm like you, Charlie, too. Sometimes I do that even at home. I get too specific. I'm trying to direct some things, and I'm like, you know what? Let me get out of the way. Let them do what they do best, And if there's a problem, should empower them. That's one thing I look at. What it's not if you're going to run into a problem or a roadblock. So when you come into a roadblock with your assignment, what are you going to do? Are you going to? Some people will ignore it. Some people will try to wait to the last minute. Some people will they'll just focus on that roadblock. Meanwhile, they could have been doing a lot of other things and they get distracted. So there's different ways we got to help them. So it's like when you hit the roadblock, when you hit the challenge, who are you going to lean on to? Who are you going to reach out to make sure that this assignment gets done, right? So just thinking about that, and providing is a balance. You remember we just talked about this recently on the other podcast, the support challenge, right? We were talking about that support challenge matrix of, we're trying to put high support and high challenge in, and that's one of the things that we're looking at as leaders. We need both. And sometimes we get in assignments in particular, I find that we do one or the other, and we want to do both to get them in that liberated place.
Yeah,
I think it leads into your other topic.
Yeah. No, that's the last one. Yes, yeah. You're right. The last language of leadership, and we're coming to a close, is challenging people to step up and do maybe even more than what they believe they're capable of right now. So why is that an important language of leadership?
Well, I mean, we were just talking about, the support is one thing, but challenge means we want them to stretch themselves. I think we start with support, and then we have to, again, similar to vision, right? Of what could we be? And so I find challenge meaning, this is oftentimes when people have a problem, right? They look, if you're the supervisor leader, they'll just come to you, I got a problem, Charlie. You're like, okay. And what are we going to do about that? I don't know. We got a problem. Like, well, you challenge them and say, okay, well, yes, we have a problem. What have you come up with? What have you thought? It may be completely wrong, but at least give me something to solve this challenge. Innovative growth. Oftentimes we find we're trying to do these solutions, and I know you know this from the IT world, Charlie. You try something, you're like, yeah, that didn't work, but it didn't work. But that seeded another way of doing some things that we didn't even envision before. I mean, you hear about Apple as innovators, right? They're innovators. They saw a problem or a challenge with music, streaming music. They're like, well, how are we going to figure that? I don't know yet how we're going to do it. Well, they ended up creating this whole platform, the iPod, all these things, right? So one thing I really liked about a funny story about that about Apple in particular, I think, Steve Jobs wanted that people moving around and talking with each other intentionally because he wanted to have them challenging each other. And he said, I can't remember if it was him or not, but there was like attributed, like, I want to see a failure rate, meaning if you're not failing, that means you're not trying hard enough. If you can succeed at everything, then you've aimed way too low. And so when you look at, we were talking earlier about kind of goals or assignments, there's different levels, if you will. And when I do my own personal planning, I do what I call this freedom map or impossible game, where I'm trying to stretch myself from what's realistic to what's radical to really what's impossible, kind of a stair-step approach. And it's uncomfortable because people don't like to lose or mess up or feel like they let down. But in reality, if they switch it around and they think, actually, I'm winning when I can learn from this, right?
Yeah.
And apply it.
Yeah. No, I like the challenge part. Like, that's actually one of the policies internally is we have a list called never and always list. And never just say no or I don't know. Always come with your solutions. If you ask the question, come up with what you've tried or what you think is the answer, and then we can have a discussion. Don't just come with a problem without thinking about what you're going to do about it.
I like that idea. You know what, you said that made me think of one platform I support every once in a while is called Kickstarter, and they have what they call stretch goals in there. And it's actually fun because you say, okay, hey, if we raise this amount of money, we could do this. But if we do this amount of money, we could do this. And if we do this amount of money, we could do this. So when you get them excited about, hey, if we could stretch, if we could achieve this, think about what we could actually do, the impact that we could do. Instead of saying, well, we could just check the box. And, if somebody comes to you, and if anybody of you guys comes to you, and I've had to do like sales goals, you said, well, we're going to do the sales the same as we did last year, or a little less, or 1%. I'm like, okay. I know there's a point of being realistic, but also like, what could we stretch for? What would make us a little uncomfortable? What would be a lot uncomfortable? And maybe test your comfort level. But I think if things that you call BHAG goals, big, hairy, audacious goals, right? I'm not saying everything needs to be that way, but you should have things that build, because then you can break them down into smaller goals and smaller challenges, so then you can actually win. And so one other one is a big one is like, if you wanted to pay off a big debt, right? Like it's a huge debt, but it's like, and you've got credit cards, car loan, whatever, all these things, right? Well, you start off with the smallest challenges. Could I just even pay off my credit card this month? Okay, that's challenge. Then
snowball
you're a
effect,
snowball, right?
Yeah.
So then it's like you build momentum.
Yep.
Look at your wins. That's the other thing I would say is we often look at what we lose. I use another app called the Warrior app, and it's a production tool that I show. And so what happens is we tend to look at the things we missed more than the things we won. But I think over the long haul, if we put ourselves in this place of challenge, and you're going to achieve more in the long haul, even if you're having misses, because the intensity that you're looking at, the longer term goals versus just hitting the same thing just a little bit. In fact, there's a book I'm reading, 10x is better than 2x, same kind of concept, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you don't challenge yourself, really, and you don't challenge yourself in your team, the market will challenge you and will put you out of business. That's why Jeff Bezos actually has a department where they're tasked with thinking of ways to put Amazon out of business, so that they can come up with the solutions before a competitor does, and then they're out of business. So
right,
think about
that's smart.
Giants, right? Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy out Netflix and declined, and look where they're at now. So they got busted. So but yeah, that was a fun topic, and
that was fun, Charlie.
Yeah, and I think the next future session that would dovetail really well is actually leveraging the four languages of leadership to address like different things that we uncover using the SWOT analysis.
Oh yeah.
And so I know some people haven't heard of that, but what can you tell us a little bit? What is SWOT analysis?
It's not like fly swatting or your police SWAT like we were talking about earlier.
SWOT, right? Yeah.
SWOT. Yeah. Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Yes.
And so, no, I think it's good. I think that it's a great planning tool as well. I think I typically like to do that with clients. It's a good time of year. Actually, we're going toward the end of the year here. I mean, it's hard to believe. We're in August, but as we're recording this right now, but it's a really good process to look at. And it could go back to you can even go back to vision casting, like you were saying, Charlie, like what is the vision? What are our strengths in achieving that vision? What are the weaknesses in achieving that vision? What are the opportunities we have of being there? What are the threats there? And so I think it's a great framework. It's very common, especially in strategic planning and looking at that. And so if you haven't looked at that recently, I think it'd be a great one, Charlie, to discuss on the podcast.
Absolutely. Looking forward to touching base on that one on a future episode. So I'm going to turn back to you, David. That was all I had for today.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you so much for the engaging conversation.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Charlie, for just bringing in another framework of the four languages of leadership, where we talked about storytelling, we talked about vision casting, assignments, challenge. And so if you haven't heard those before, I haven't heard them exactly in that way. So I liked really just hearing a different way of bringing another spin on it, Charlie, and getting the opportunity to explore them with you. If you really like this podcast, you're listening here, we appreciate having you share this podcast with others. You can actually watch us on YouTube. It's also streamed on all your favorite podcast platforms. So you can find us on Apple, Spreaker, whatever your favorite platform is. We're there. We love have a review, a 5-star review from you would be much appreciated. If you're interested in joining us on the podcast, you can reach out to me. I've got a number of guests that have inquired about getting on here. So we're excited that we're reaching more great, talented business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders out there that are willing to come and share their knowledge with you, our listeners. And again, just want to say thank you, Charlie, for leading this discussion and being back here on the Business Roundtable Podcast. And until next time, take care. Be well, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Have a good night, guys. Bye.